Pilot boys in the building. Let's go.
Pilot boys, we get on up. We the fly boys, we getting up.
You listen to the Pilot Boys podcast. We are joined by a very special guest, Partha Unnava, who is an entrepreneur, a mentor, and an industry expert in the early stage medical device space. Partha, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Mecca and Vishwant. I'm excited, guys. Excited to get back to the Columbus roots.
Yeah, I hope I didn't undersell you, man. I know you have so many things going on and probably so many different titles. You are an impressive dude. So we're going to get to a lot of that stuff, man. But again, like I said, thanks for joining us. Go ahead, V. Yeah. Kick us off.
All right, I guess we'll start with our roots and just tell us a little bit about your start in Columbus, Ohio, and what your initial part of your journey before you became an entrepreneur and the role that your development as a child ultimately impacted your decision to go to Georgia Tech and eventually become the entrepreneur extraordinaire that you are today.
Yeah, man. I mean, I started in Columbus, and the whole idea for me was grow up and be a doctor, being brown, doing that whole thing. And I went to Georgia Tech because they were top in biomedical engineering. And so my thought process was, well, if I don't want to be a doctor, I can be an engineer. There's the other okay job to
sounds typical.
Yeah. And when I got to college, it was this interesting, awakening and I think like a lot of people in our generation are having this, right? Where you get to a certain point in your life and you realize that you've been living more for the expectations of other people, but you've never really taken the to really figure out what do you want to do with your life and what makes you happy. So as I started to go through that process, I knew like pretty quickly I didn't want to go to medical school because I wasn't really interested in a lot of the stuff they were studying, but I was really, really interested in biomechanics and learning how the body works. I'm super passionate about sports, culture, music, entertainment. So I saw that there was like kind of going the brand route in terms of building a business could be something interesting. And really everything for me started after I broke my ankle playing basketball. I was on crutches for 6 weeks. And so when I was in college, I started working on a new idea for a crutch that would basically help stabilize the body, but not hurt your underarms. And so I actually dropped out of college to pursue that, raise money for it. And eventually, about 4 or 5 years down that path, just saw that there was a lower ceiling on that business than I wanted from a revenue standpoint. So repositioned what we were doing to eventually become Lasso as it is now, and a much higher ceiling on what we're doing now.
Before we get to some of that stuff, I want to talk a little bit about you went to Dublin Kaufman. And It's funny, I grew up in Columbus. I went to St. Francis de Sales, but I was in Dublin all the time. AMC movie theaters was the spot when we were younger, and Sawmill Lanes, So I was in Dublin, and I actually played soccer at Dublin Premier. I was literally Avery Road. That was my life. So,
that's awesome.
But it's funny now. My nephew actually goes to Kaufman. He's a sophomore there, but Dublin looks entirely different. I have other nephews that go to Jerome. Yeah. Talk a little bit about that, about what it was like growing up in Dublin, and if you've had any experiences coming back to Dublin, what are some of the differences that you see now between when you were growing up there and what it's like now?
Yeah, so when I moved there, I had originally grown up in Westerville, so a little different. And my parents actually made the decision to move when it's like right at the end of my 5th grade. They had decided not to increase education budgets in the city, and so there was this kind of general sentiment that the schools were going to get worse. So my parents made the decision to move, and Dublin is, an incredible school system, like a very, very well put together group of people. They're very thoughtful. They're very mindful about, how you can expose somebody to new ideas. And what was exciting about going to school there was that the opportunities were very significant. So like, for example, I could participate in fencing club, which was not ever an option if I had gone to school in Westerville. And there's just a lot of privilege that comes from that community. So it helped me to see different paths and just like explore different things that I wouldn't have tried before. And, when I was there, I was really active in band, in marching band, jazz, all of that. I was like in all those student organizations as well. So it just gave me a place to like thrive. And to your point now, going back, it's crazy, dude. It's like legitimately rivaling some college campuses. So
For those who
don't know, they bought the old Verizon headquarters in Dublin and they turned it into basically like a mixed use building for students. And it's all anything off the normal course from typical academics. So they have a bunch of entrepreneurship curriculums there. They actually started biomedical engineering there. I've been working with them because one of my really good friends from Columbus became a music producer out here. So to help them build also like a music track into their program as
Nice.
well.
Nice. That's awesome.
So did you have any kind of childhood entrepreneurial spark, your hustles that you had as a kid that kind of early on taught you some basic things about running a business or selling
Dude,
products?
so I'm in the minority on this. I had zero desire or interest to do anything entrepreneurial. What I did in my free time, I organized a Olympics for our air quotes there for our neighborhood when I was a kid. So I made flyers, I advertised it, I put together events, and like we did it every season for like a year or two. So it was a thing that people in our neighborhood looked forward to. And so for me, it was always like getting people to compete was always something that was really exciting for me.
Right.
Yeah.
And you went to Georgia Tech after that, and obviously, biomedical, engineering, and obviously a very technical and very smart school, but also a rich school and tradition when it comes to football. And Georgia Tech is part of the ACC, who's also happens to be playing football and potentially starting this week.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on, I guess, one, Georgia Tech football, and then two, the idea of the ACC playing football this fall?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think as a college athlete, it makes sense to want to play, especially on the football side, because how else are you going to demonstrate how much better you got to be able to make it in the league? There's a whole lot of guys that make that jump, right? So that's the tough part about this. But the flip side is, it's a school sport. It's a pretty rough time to be playing a very, very physical game like that when there's a disease going around, right? So I'm super mixed on it. Georgia Tech football in general, I was very pessimistic on because I don't like the triple option. I like
Yeah.
it as a component of an offensive
Right.
scheme. I don't like it being the entire offensive scheme.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
now that we have a spread coach, I think in 3 to 4 years, it'll actually be a decent program again, which will be exciting. But I'm
Yeah.
far more of an Ohio State fan.
That's right. I love it.
So I wanted to go into that, right? You go to Georgia Tech, biomedical engineering is a pretty intense major where you probably spent all your time studying for the most part and probably didn't have much of a social life. Take us into kind of the setback. You mentioned it earlier. There's a setback that you had, the story behind that setback, what you were trying to do, and how that inspired you to start the business in the first place.
Yeah, so for me it was, I was playing basketball with some friends and I came down on somebody's foot after getting a rebound, rolled my ankle pretty bad, and it turned out to be a break. And so going through that process, I hadn't been particularly athletic my whole life, and it was always a goal of mine. So I set this goal to basically dunk a basketball. I had never touched the backboard before. So this was an ambitious goal, and 12 months later, I achieved it after having the injury. So it was exciting for me to go through the process of basically learning and researching, like, how do I improve my body? What do I need to eat? What do I need to do in the gym? How do I work out? How do I train myself? And like, what are the different types of muscles? All of that was probably the most fun I've ever had. And like, still now, like, my favorite thing to do is like do my workout research and then tweak and modify my workout to get better or different things out of my body. So it's very exciting for me to do all of that. And it just kind of opened up a way of thinking in my head where I started to see how many people didn't have access to that kind of information, and how many people, it's a lot of work to do that research, right? And in general, if you look at a lot of articles, they're mostly written to sell products, or they're written for a reason other than sharing genuine information. So for the regular person, it's very hard to know, how do I improve my physical health, more or less. And so when I started with the crutch, the intent was to help set an example in the market that you can actually innovate all these products that have a significant impact on how we move, and people just choose not to, right? And so they choose not to because the healthcare system is messed up from an infrastructure standpoint. Insurance money basically dictates where innovation happens, and the insurance margins on the products that help us move physically are smaller than ever. So most of those products have been commoditized and they've been pushed out into pharmacy, Amazon, et cetera. So that was why I decided I didn't want to go down the crutch path any further, because it just didn't have the ability to create impact in a dynamic way in the industry. But kind of flip the script when we looked at Lasso, the idea was let's create something that can work with someone at any point in their lifestyle. So not just when you're injured and recovering, but how can we also improve performance, and how can we also add value on a day-to-day lifestyle use case with a product? And so what we did was basically we created a new way to support and stabilize joints through apparel. And so we have a lot of IP around that. And with the sock, the idea was take away the instruction manuals, the information I was talking about that it's very hard to get, take all of that, synthesize it into a super well-designed, easy to use product that people can use every day, and create a brand that basically helps to service this very physically active lifestyle that many people are opting for these days. So basically enable people to move better without having to think about it, just by knowing, hey, we did the thinking for you. Everyone at Lasso does that thinking for you. So if you buy a Lasso product, it's already guaranteed to be one of the best products on the market, if not the best, for improving how you move. And our socks are the best for that.
One question I have too is, and I'm going to stereotype here a little bit, but you talked about dropping out of school, right? And immigrant families generally are not too fond of that type of decision. I'm Nigerian, and I left a big law firm to pursue my career in hip hop, and so I can understand what you did. But talk a little bit about what that period was like, even explaining to your parents and or your family, and then dealing with kind of some of the kind of cultural and societal backlash when you decided to initially make that move.
Yeah, so this is funny. My parents they were both professors at Fisher. Where you guys both went, right, to Fisher? So
V went to Fisher.
Yeah. You did, okay. So they were both professors at Fisher, and that I grew up basically on campus in the business school, going to games, doing that whole thing. And so that's where I got indoctrinated both into Ohio State, but also over dinner table conversations growing up. I didn't realize how much business I was learning, because my parents specialize in marketing, branding, and basically consumer communication. So exactly what we do, as a company.
Right.
But I didn't know I was learning all of that as I was growing up. So as I got older, it's funny. One of my mentors said to me one time that what you're the best at is usually not what you think you're the best at, because it comes so effortlessly to you that you've never thought about improving that skill set, right?
Very true.
And so that was indicator for me as I got out into the business world. Dropping out, to your question, I positioned it as I was taking a break to my parents. That, you know what you have to say to get where you have to go. But that break lasted a very long time, and then my credits expired, so I can't go back. So I was waiting for the mark where I couldn't go back anymore, so I could say, hey, I'm officially done. But they were supportive. I mean, when you see an opportunity, and I raised money from venture capital when I dropped out of school. So it wasn't like, hey, I'm just dropping out to go after my dreams, but it was like immediate validation from a third party that was well respected.
So important.
Yeah.
And talk to us about that process too, because we've had people on here. We had Josh Childress on the show a couple weeks ago, and he was talking about just the challenges of raising money, particularly in the pandemic, but also just in general, as a founder, as a new founder, as a person of color. Talk to us about that. How were you able to just raise money from a venture capitalist that early, even with a brilliant idea?
And at 19, 20 years old, you could barely buy a beer. So those conversations had to be interesting, right?
Yeah, it was. So I went through the accelerator route. So basically it's like they'll take in 6-10 companies per summer or whatever, and teach you the basics of a business, give you some funding to get started. For everyone that proves out their business model, they'll give them more funding to help them keep going. So I went that route. I picked one that was medical, so the cash amounts were higher. As opposed, most accelerators will do 20K. This one, I got 150K. So it gave me the runway to actually start doing some stuff. And, like when you're young like that, your expenses to live are like nothing. So that money goes a really long way. And it went long enough to help me prove out the business model. But to your point, Mecca, fundraising it's a very challenging thing today, especially with COVID. It's an excuse that anyone can give when they're just, I'm not sure yet. And really what it means when you get those excuses is it's not that they're not sure on your business model or any of that, but it's more like, hey, you haven't done enough to make me feel like I'm going to miss this opportunity if I don't jump in, right? And so without being like, some people play games, some people will try to use leverage to get things to close quickly. And usually when I get those indicators from investors, it's been like an arduous process raising like the current round we're raising right now through all of COVID. And, we never get no's, but we get not yets. And that's how I see every no's and not yet. And so ultimately, as long as you keep those people in your email list, give them updates every month, every couple months, and just let them know what's going on. I mean, we're a company that hits our marks. And so when we hit those, whether it's revenue, whether it's other goals that we've set for ourselves, we just continue to show, hey, we do the things we say we're going to do. And over time, those people who were saying not yet start to come in, but it's extremely challenging. And, I definitely think like it's harder when you're not white for sure, but I like really don't like thinking about that because then it gives me an excuse mentally to say it's hard. So I don't like going down that thread.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
And also wanted to, you said that, at that age, you got $150,000, right? One of the hardest things for people at that age is actually managing money, right? And not blowing it and not wasting it on things that don't really help the business. How did you discipline yourself early on to focus that money toward the business and to use it efficiently without having a lot of experience ever running or developing a business?
Yeah, my problem was actually the opposite. I grew up very frugal. My family is very below our means in how we live. And so I just never saw a lot of spend like that. So when it came to the company's money, I actually had to work to spend money. I had to be able to make multiple $1,000 commitments to whether it's people or whether it's the agencies that you're going to bring on to achieve a goal. I had to get more comfortable with making those commitments. And that was, it was a process, and there were definitely mistakes I made along the way, but every time just learn better how to not only make the commitments and know what good pricing is for a certain service, but then also like, how do you know that that's going to be delivered? Do you set up criteria to make sure that the group you're talking to is going to deliver the outcome you want? And if they don't, what's going to happen? Like learning all of those pieces of a transaction was really, really critical.
Talk to us a little bit about the kind of the proprietary stuff in the product, obviously without giving any like secrets away.
Yeah.
Talk to us about the development of a product, because there are a lot of people, for example, that have great ideas and wonderful ideas that would change the world, right? But when it comes to actual development, they have no idea where to go. Like, how do you, when you have the idea, okay, yeah, I want to build this crutch, which first of all, is a brilliant idea. I was on crutches pretty much all last year, so I could have used one that didn't chafe my arms. But like, where do you go in terms of, okay, so you want to start the business, you want to build the product, you obviously need to protect, certain maybe patent certain things, trademark certain things. Like there's a process. Talk to just a little bit. You don't have to go into extensive detail, but just talk to us a little bit about that for someone who might be listening, who wants to, take a product to market.
Yeah. So there's a few ways you can go about it. To take a product to market the right way requires a lot of capital, and you need very top engineers and designers to be able to think through all of the aspects of it. But some of the challenges, I guess, like the first question is it something completely new, or is it a modification on something that already exists? So if it's something completely new, that's going to be an expensive process. If you don't have the skills to do all of the engineering and design work yourself, those firms are extremely pricey and they're very slow and they don't get it right. So it takes a lot of revisions, which takes more time. So you're looking at anywhere from 50 to 150K in development costs of a brand new idea, typically, depending on the space. I have a lot of those design skills from college. So I was able to do basically everything up until you get it to manufacturing ready. And so manufacturing ready is like a totally different story, because then you have to modify the design to work on the manufacturer's machines. And what's interesting is that every manufacturer does things differently. So this is kind of where the human element comes in. Is like in school, they teach you that there's standards for things, and there's really not that many standards. The standard is who's making it, and you make it the way they want you to make it, right?
Right.
So you have to first identify people who own manufacturing facilities in your space that make similar products or the same type of product. And you have to get them to buy in to you, into your idea,
Yeah.
the fact that your business will grow. If you don't have that, it's really kind of a non-starter, because they're just going to take your money, deliver some kind of product, but it won't be the kind of buy-in and the kind of help that you need early stage to really make the product great. And they're not
Right.
going to have the, energy to help you with all the growing pains of getting something started, which is a very painful process anytime you launch a new product. So it's very important to have like a very clear business and marketing plan, to have great supporters around you, and to be able to tell the story about what you're doing and who all is involved in making it happen in a compelling way. I think it's all down to the pitch, right? Even fundraising. But if you can do that, and really like all those answers are inward, it's not out in the world. It's not like if you didn't do your market research that you're not going to be able to sell a manufacturer. But instead, it's more like, do you understand truly what you're trying to do, the impact it'll have, and do you have a clear plan that you can communicate with confidence as to how you're getting it out there? And if you hit those factors and you're very sure of what you're doing, I think people can genuinely tell, and then they get involved and they get excited.
I have one quick follow up to that. V. You do a lot of mentoring, and I think that that's fantastic because, just to be honest, and this is not a shot at you in any way, but there's a lot of privilege in this conversation that we're having, right? Yeah. Even from our standpoint, that we don't realize, right? Because it's just kind of who we are and how we grew up, and it is what it is. But just even the idea, because I hear people say all the time, "Oh, I should have thought of that idea. I would be a billionaire." I was like, there's a lot more than thinking of the idea, right? Like you have to actually have the knowledge, and you have to have the resources, and you have to know how to raise capital, and you have to put the team together and all these other type of things. But one thing that you've done and expressed interest in is mentoring, which I think is great. Talk to us a little bit about that and why that's become important to you in this process as well.
Yeah, man. I mean, I think it's the recognition of that, right? Like I'm super aware that I had a lot of opportunities people didn't have. So when I meet people who I can help, and mentoring is where it gets tough, because a lot of people want to be mentored, but not a lot of people want to work. So once you find the people that really want to put the work in, I've never met somebody who actually is ready to put in however many hours a day of work who doesn't get to where they want to go. But some people's paths are harder, And so the biggest thing that I see that like really like is challenging for people to overcome is the almost conditioning you get based on where you grew up, whether it's scarcity or abundance mentality.
Yes.
And getting out of that frame of thinking, that frame of how you create doubts for yourself, that frame of how you see the world, and looking at things differently. And once you're able to get your head around that, there's consequences to it. Mm-hmm. Your friends don't really relate to you anymore because you just changed your belief and value system.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to start identifying with different types of people. Your family, you might have more friction with them, or it might be frustrating because they don't see the world the same way you do now. And so there's a lot of these different things that'll happen that are very, very uncomfortable and end up to be very isolating. So the real truth of it is, if you want to really make a dynamic impact on the world, it's a lonely journey. And if you're comfortable with that, you know how to keep yourself happy, and you're able to find a good group of friends to take that ride with you. I mean, Mecca, I'm sure it's exactly kind of what you feel pursuing music fully after being an attorney, right? Like even on product development, like how do you get, I'm not sure if you produce your own stuff, but how do you get great producers to work with you? Mm-hmm. How do you get, great A&Rs involved in what you're building? How do you get the right visual artists for the album art and for the experience on stage and all of that? How do you get the right engineers to even give you time or to work on spec or for a percentage? Like that's the same conversation we're having.
Absolutely.
How do you get people to understand that it's not just about whether you can rap, it's about whether you can make music, right? The whole thing is it's
market. So there's a lot involved there.
Yeah. So it's a whole challenge. And, to help other people see that, everyone has to go through a tremendous amount of pain and frustration and anxiety really to get there. And so it's whether people are willing to do that. And I think what's interesting is when you find people from tougher economic circumstances and their upbringing, they're more willing to go through that kind of pain to get there.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And we did talk about the privilege aspect of this, but also, just anyone who's an entrepreneur, whether it's someone who comes from a background of privilege or like Bill Gates, right? in Outliers, Malcolm Gladwell kind of actually studies success and all the external variables that factor into someone's success. But a lot of time isn't spent on talking about the downtime, right? Every celebrity, everyone knows about them after they're famous. But that struggle, everyone kind of goes through that struggle when they're introducing something new to the world, no matter, like you said, whether they're rich or poor. When you start something, it's very difficult, right? And that journey is a lonely one, like you mentioned. Kind of take us into that period, like some of the early challenges. We know where you're at now, but some of your early challenges and you battles, everyone goes through depression, different emotion, an emotional roller coaster that's very different than the product development aspect of this thing. If you could just take us a little bit into that and how you kind of used, I know you've said you used hip hop to kind of help you through some of that for yourself. So if you can kind of tell us a little bit about that.
Totally, man. A year after I started the company, I'd started with 2 business partners, and they both left 1 year in, and it was right as we were running out of money. And we were all living together, and they left the apartment. So I had 2 other rooms to sublease, to people I had just met on Craigslist. For me, as someone who had dropped out of college, all my peers are now in year 4 of college, and I'm by myself in this apartment in Atlanta with no family nearby at all, and just completely isolated, and on the path to debt, really, right? And not sure what I'm going to do. And that was a very, very tough time for me. I mean, I used to, just break down a lot. And for me during that moment, it was, you guys listen to the warm up by J. Cole?
Yep. One of my
Yes, sir.
favorite.
Go to the warm up. He has that line where he's just like talking about his journey, right? And he says, if something about stopping, and then he just kind of pauses and goes, not that I would stop anyway. And that line like really hit me strongly, because it was just this complete dismissal of just the idea of quitting your journey. Like, no matter how hard it gets, like, why would you ever stop? And so I just kind of held to that. And so no matter how hard it got, I just remembered, like, yeah, I can't stop. Like, motion, right? Movement keeps you going. It keeps you alive. It keeps you active. And if you just keep moving forward, you'll eventually get somewhere. But the journey might be alone. And eventually when you get somewhere, there might be a lot of other people there, but the path to getting there is usually solo. And so, I mean, hip hop was big for that. I went broke 2 more times after that. I had to cut almost all of my employees twice, went into debt 3 times total. And that was over the course of like 4 years. So it's like every time stuff started working, I just kept getting knocked back down. And, over time, as I've gotten more mature with the journey and with handling ups and downs, I've just started to realize that there's just events. There's no like good things or bad things in life. There's just things. And then there's your reaction to those things and how you handle them. And back then, had I been able to handle all of those situations, I probably wouldn't have had so much pain in my life. It probably would have been a lot easier, but I didn't know not only how to deal with my emotions or anxieties, but I also didn't know how to deal with something bad happening or something not to the plan that I had.
And what's interesting too is one of the things that kind of helps you with that, like as an entrepreneur, are the accolades and the success, right? You're a Forbes 30 under 30 and those type of things that happen. And it's almost like the external validation that you talked about before that kind of reminds you like, okay, I'm on the right path. But what some people don't understand about accolades, especially sometimes, is that they also can have the opposite effect, which is they can create a feeling of insecurity or a feeling of like, do I deserve this? Or what's next? Or, oh my God, now people are watching me, and the pressure of success, so to speak. And then also sometimes you might get this big accolade that like everyone is like, and you're everywhere, but your money isn't in order, or you're not necessarily generating profit yet or whatever. Talk a little bit about that. How have you navigate, how have the accolades, so to speak, how have they helped, and how have you kind of navigated that as you use that to your advantage, or maybe not as you move through this process?
In 2014, I went to the White House. I was invited there to meet President Obama and show the crutch and all of that. And it was like a moment of tremendous recognition, led to a ton of press. And I got back to Atlanta, and I was still in this apartment with no roommates. trying to find people on Craigslist.
Yeah.
Like there was a mattress in the living room. That was the only furniture in there. Like it was so bad. It felt so bad to live there. And well, at least I had a mattress, I guess.
Right.
And I would go to like parties because, you know, this would have been my fourth year of college. So I'd go try to hang out with my friends and, you know, like different groups on campus. And Georgia Tech blasted my name everywhere for this, which is awesome. Like they gave me
Yeah.
so much press, so much support. But whenever I would go to campus or to a party, there was always like whispering, pointing right when I walked into a room because they had shined a lot of light on me. I wasn't
Yeah.
comfortable handling that kind of attention. I didn't have enough fixed inside of me. Like I didn't have it together enough to be able to
Yeah.
project just straight love when I got that kind of shine. So I kind of shied away from it. And it was an important learning lesson for me because, you know, I think it wasn't really till COVID, to be honest, that I like fully got a straight glimpse into how to understand like the parts of me that were broken and how they affect the people around me. It took a little bit of growth, but back then I was definitely doing a lot of reacting. And so
Yeah.
I was more acting out because I was in pain. I didn't know how to handle all of these different things that were coming at me. And so I think, I mean, while that was great for building momentum for me and all of that, I basically had to do a completely fresh restart to take what I had and build properly with Lasso, you know. And it's not like we were building a bad business, but my psyche wasn't in the right headspace to really do things on the level we're doing them now. I wasn't able to think big enough because I was just dealing with so much inside.
Right. Wow.
I wanted to circle back to that. I wanted to ask this as a follow-up to my question. That in itself, right? You were young, 18, 19, 20, when you said you didn't have the emotional balance to kind of understand the things that you went through, even accolades, even accepting accolades, you hadn't experienced that. Can you take us through what a moment or when that shifted? Because it's also very important to be almost insanely confident in yourself as an entrepreneur to get to where you're trying to go. And you need to project that confidence. Was there something that happened that kind of the light came on for you and you stopped feeling that sense of insecurity and you said, hey, I'm going to go for mine now. I'm confident. I trust myself. I trust my business. Was there a moment that you felt that, and how did that shift your business moving forward when you had that moment or those moments?
So I don't think, like, to be honest, I don't think I fully eradicated it until this year. So up until this year, I mean, I had been chipping away, you know, building more confidence, like better handling when I noticed that I was being insecure. And I started journaling a couple years ago every single day. That gave me a lot more self-awareness because I got to see my thoughts in writing. So it let me know, oh, that's what I'm thinking. And like I built a really strong meditation practice that I do every day. So a lot of those types of habits, but bro, really like there's no kids that listen to this, right?
You can curse if that's what you're asking.
No. So I did mushrooms in May as my first hallucinogenic
Oh, wow.
experience. And I had this like total complete ego death. And I just stopped associating so much of my emotional well-being with like this idea of myself that I was trying to portray of being this like great entrepreneur and impact maker and all of that. Started just being a regular person and just like being aware of who I am and just like trying to do as much good and positive stuff as I could every day. And it was like from that point, it was just like pushing the gas down. Like I got 3 to 5 times more done every day. And it wasn't more work. It was less work. It was like a really weird switch up. It's like I just got a lot of clarity in terms of exactly which buttons and I needed to push and which levers I needed to pull to start creating these really, really large effects on, you know, our community or our market or society or our industry or whatever. I just like something just clicked for me. And it was because I got out of my own way. I stopped having to be the guy. You know what I mean? I feel like probably LeBron felt that way when he was in Miami that first year like that whole between him and Dwayne Wade, they didn't know who needed to step up and nobody wanted to. And, I think that second year in that Boston series, when they had that game 6 and he went off like crazy, I think that was a moment where he probably had that same dissociation from self and just went purely into the task at hand and got out of the narrative of like having to be the guy. And as a result, he became the guy because he stopped trying to be the guy and just started doing the thing that the guy does. And I think like, our slogan is stay moving. And the way I think about it is if you build really great habits that keep you in motion, you get where you want to go. And if you sit still and you just dwell on things and you worry too much, then you're going to paralyze yourself. So
I think that's I think that's a great point. And I think for entrepreneurs, especially as you start to achieve success, I think that's an important way to look at things. Because one of the things that, V and I have talked about in our own businesses is like, as you continue to get success, the pressure starts to build, right? And now you have people relying on you, whether it's, employees or independent contractors or customers or people who are like, like they rely on what you do day to day. And that creates a whole different type of pressure. Now it's not just you trying to achieve a goal, but you actually serving a purpose to the community. And I want to talk a little bit about that before we get to more specifically about Lasso. I want to hear your perspective on Lasso, but how have you dealt with that aspect of things as things have grown? And now you realize, okay, shit, this isn't just about me. When I say Lasso, this isn't just a Partha thing. Now this is like, wow, like all these people are relying on it. How have you separated yourself from that, or do you kind of embrace that as part of the journey?
I think of it a lot more like it's like a team, right? Like it's shared burden on everybody's shoulders and everybody has to step up and perform at that level. And so I don't see my role as any different or more impactful than anyone else on our team, but I do get the most shine because people want to hear from the guy who's setting the direction and the vision and helping clarity to that. Because from a macro, world standpoint, that's what people care about is like, what impact will this have on my life? Well, you're going to want to hear from me if you want to know what impact it'll have on your life over the future, if you want to dream like that.
Right.
But from the standpoint of day-to-day tasks, I just have a different set of tasks than everybody on my team. But the way I think of it is, I think they say this in sports all the time. I used to hear this all the time. Big players make big plays. So if you want to be a big player, you got to make big plays. And that means you can't shy away from the moment. The moment can't even be greater than anything else, right? It's just another moment where you're making another shot that you've made a million times before. And it doesn't matter who's watching, how many people are watching, what time is it, but it's just doing the same things you do every day. And that goes back to kind of that premise of build great habits, habits of successful people. If you do those things every day, like for me, I've started implementing some fitness into my day every day. And I'm doing it in a way that it's very mentally taxing. And I'm also taking a lot more cold showers and basically learning that when I do things that create discomfort, then my work becomes very easy and very comfortable. And so it's almost like if you don't do those things, then your work is where you gauge like success and failure on. And then part of work becomes very uncomfortable and very tough for you. But when you have things that are 100 times harder for you than what you're doing intellectually, then it's not so hard to deal with whatever is going on.
As a follow-up to that, I also want to talk about, you mentioned earlier, part of this is you are the CEO of the company, but there are a lot of people who are very important in making the company go. And what happens a lot in companies that start to grow, you see this in a lot of these startup stories. You mentioned your friends that kind of abandoned you in the business at a certain point, and I'm sure you've had other people do the same. But how do you kind of manage and understand, have the emotional awareness to understand kind of the egos that come into play in a business, right? If someone is getting jealous of Partha for always being on TV, or someone's getting paid more than someone else, or how do you manage that within an organization and make sure that the bond stays strong?
We try to stay super clear about expectations and then the delivered results. So that's been a really big thing recently for us is, great communication as a team, great planning. And then also, to that point, back to the big players make big plays. Like I told somebody on our team this recently, right? It's like, you want to make more money, then let's make more revenue,
Mm-hmm.
and be the cause for that. Prove to me that you're worth more than you are. And that goes for everybody on our team, including myself. Like if you do things above and beyond that provide a material impact on what we're doing, you will earn more. That's how we believe pay should work. So, I mean, we're still like our whole team is making a lot of sacrifices on salary and all of these things because we're an early stage company still. And that's what you have to do for a long time as an early stage team. However, when I think about like the egos in our team, we're fortunate because in general, we don't have a lot of ego. And when we do, we call it out very, very quickly. And we try to, I think, break it almost with realistic conversations about like, hey, you might feel that way, but let's talk about like the tangibles. Like, what did you deliver when? It's like if you have a player who's got a big ego, it's like, cool, well, are you showing that on the field? If you're balling out, like, sure, then I'm just going to be a little irritated with you, but you can do what you got to do that. But if you're not, then
Yep. That makes
I have a quick question about that. That's just, how do you balance kind of that conversation and that thinking with just the kind of ills of capitalism, right? And, you know, it's like you don't want to necessarily have people measure their entire worth on how much money they generated, right? But at the same time, you're a business. You know what I mean? So it's like those things do matter. How do you deal with that kind of that push and pull that I assume you naturally have just as a human being?
Yeah, we're fortunate because nobody on our team's working for the money. So if they were, they wouldn't be working for us with what we're able to pay right now. I mean, that's just factually true.
Right.
And that's just, again, part of being an early stage company, right? Like there's mixed compensation, like there's delayed compensation. There's a lot of different things that you do to ensure that you can grow at a rapid enough rate to really compete in the market. On our team, everybody is down for that because they see the bigger picture that we're building. And so if they weren't, they wouldn't be with us. They'd be doing something else, and that would be totally fine. If their values didn't align like that, they should do something else.
Yeah.
But when it comes to, greater compensation, the way I see it is I think there's certain amounts of money that once you hit, it doesn't have a material impact on your life if you make any more, right?
Right.
When I think about where I want to get all of my employees that perform and everyone that helps build, I plan to eventually get everyone to that kind of point. And I have very direct conversations with them about what is not there yet and what needs to be there for them to get to that point. So ultimately, my dream is for everyone to really step up into this amazing leadership position, be very, very good at what they do, to have a lot of perspective, to be great executors. Reality-wise, we'll see. We'll see how many people are up to the challenge. But so far, everybody on our team is very receptive to it. And I mean, I'm extremely direct. I don't like to sugarcoat things. I like to be very straight up and not rude, not like a dick, but like straight and honest with people. And so
people appreciate that.
I hope so. Yeah. And like no one on our team's like, oh, I want to make this much more money or else I'm going to quit, or like they're not driven by that. But it's more like, hey, I'd like to make this amount of money to help with XYZ developments going on in my life that, might be settling down or might be having a kid or whatever the course may be, right? It's like, I get that. And I want to be the kind of company that you can, the kind of CEO and build a company that you can work for your whole life. That would be amazing. So ultimately our visions are aligned in terms of getting everybody to be able to be compensated super well and have a good life. But I think that people see that it's earned. And when you can set a clear path and set measurable goals, then that's as good as a yes if somebody asks for a pay raise, right? Because you gave them an exact plan on how to get there.
Right.
One of the unique things that I saw in kind of reading a little bit more about your story was that you did develop the crutch initially, and the crutch started to become successful, right? You had contracts with hospitals and it was generating revenue and your investors were happy. But you decided in the midst of that, while you were building a successful company, to say, hey, this isn't what the long-term goal of my company is, or my long-term goal is. Kind of take us through that moment, because it's very hard for someone to go and talk to their investors and even themselves when you have something that's successful and say, hey, this isn't right though. I don't care that it's making money and it's growing, but I don't think that this is viable in the long term. Can you take us through that? And that's a good segue into Lasso.
Sure, man. At that point, I just saw a rapidly approaching ceiling for us being able to sell crutches because, medical adoption was slow. So it would be a very painful and expensive process to hire the reps and everything to make that happen. Um, the end company wouldn't be significantly large. And in my mind, it wouldn't have really changed culture as much as I thought it would in the healthcare space. And that's what I came to do, is create impact. So I just sat down with my investors, was like, this isn't it. Like, we set out to achieve this goal, but this is not going to get us there by any means. It's going to be a terrible business to raise money for. We might get someone to buy it, but to what end? We'll all get very diluted and the business won't have done anything in the world. So it would have been just a waste of all the sacrifices I had made. But I had already developed Lasso in the meantime, and we had it basically ready to go. So we launched the product and then pulled the crutch off the market at the same time and rebranded the whole company to Lasso. That was something that I had a very strong instinct that it would work, given all of the time we had spent in this sector of medical. And it did. I mean, within 2 weeks, we were on NFL fields on game day.
Wow. And
Wow.
that's amazing. That's just an amazing story. When I read that part of it, I think a lot of people, there's a saying from the American Gangster when the guy says, quitting while you're ahead is not the same thing as quitting, right? And realizing that was a moment or a season in your life and transitioning. I think a lot of entrepreneurs naturally miss that, right? Because they become so involved with their own success that they don't see, hey, where are we going now? Where are we headed? Is this going to get us there? And I think in growth, they always say, like, starting a business is one mountain to climb. Managing your growth and managing your business once it's successful is a completely different one. And I thought that was very telling about.
And then also the ego, right? And the kind of your baby, right? When you start a business, people don't realize it's like having a kid in a lot of ways, and you really become attached to it. And so to be able to kind of detach yourself from that and see the bigger picture, I think it's exceptional. And so you did talk a little bit about Lasso, but I want you to go in a little bit more detail. It's an exceptional company, but I want to hear from you. A lot of times you see things online, you hear things here and there, but if you were to kind of break it down for us and for our listeners, how would you describe what Lasso is and what the goals are for the future?
Yeah. By the way, you guys also went through the same thing, quitting your high-paying jobs and going after a dream. So I wouldn't say that DNA is it's too tough to find. I think everyone has it in them, but you just kind of have to figure it out.
Yeah, that's true.
To the point of Lasso, so we're positioned to be the high-performance lifestyle brand, and how we consider that is, in 2020 and moving forward, the lifestyle that people want to adopt is a very active one. So they want to work out every day. They want to do some element of recovery. They want to do some element of meditation or spirituality. They want to then go to the boardroom, close a deal, do their meeting, and then hop on a plane. They're in a new city, and then the routine starts over. To live a lifestyle like that, you need products that don't just work for one use case. They have to work across the board and support you staying active and mobile all the time. We look at that through the products we make. So our socks, which is the first product, but just the first example of what our technology can do, helps you with performance by helping provide support when you're cutting, running, jumping, squatting, whatever motion. It improves balance and proprioception. That's the essence of how it works. On the recovery side, it's actually Duke's doing this right now. When you have an ankle injury, they'll give you an ankle brace, and they'll also give you a Lasso sock. So it's starting to pick up in the medical world as basically like a method of musculoskeletal care after the ankle brace phase, because a brace will get you to 90% healthy, but it doesn't give you full range of motion. So our product is actually the only way to stabilize a joint and get full range of motion at the same time. So we have a fit on that side. And then from a recovery standpoint, we have the knee-high version, which I wear after runs or after workouts for the rest of the day. It helps improve circulation to let your body recover a little bit faster. On top of that, there's a lot of professionals that use our products, like medical professionals, delivery drivers, chefs, people who are on their feet a lot. All of those people we consider living a high performance lifestyle. At the end of the day, if you're trying to stay active, whether you're young or whether you're older and you just want to be able to play with your kids or your grandkids, we want to make products that help facilitate that without an instruction manual, without making you feel like you're hurt, like a lot of medical products do, but rather things that
Right.
feel like really cool, sexy, forward-thinking products that stick with fashion trends and still provide movement benefit immediately.
And there are two important kind of follow-ups to that, right? Which is, one, you have a great company. That's obvious. You recognized a need in the marketplace and you tried to solve that problem. Those are great steps in the process. The next step, and the hardest step oftentimes, is, one, convincing investors and customers to believe in you and recognizing who those people are, right? Can you tell us how you went through that process? Because there are a lot of great businesses and great ideas that never figure out, like, for example, you said that at Duke, they get a pair of socks when they recover from surgery. How do you go about recognizing those type of opportunities and finding them? Because at the end of the day, revenue is the end goal. But the challenge is, who are my customers and how do I find them?
Yeah. Sports wise, we got a lot of traction early. I got put in touch with Champ Bailey when we had just started Lasso, and he came on as an investor, board member very early. So he was the first real major co-sign. It was because he loved the product. He put it on, didn't want to take it off. And it's like, okay, this could make sense here. I want to be a part of this. Once Champ came on, he helped us recruit a lot more athletes. We got a lot of people to not only wear the product, but a lot to come on board as investors. On the industry side, we brought on guys like Uli Becker, who's a former CEO of Reebok and former head of marketing at Adidas. So he did the whole Impossible is Nothing campaign, which is like the most award-winning campaign ever. And then on the medical side, to your point, we had a lot of chiropractors, orthopedic surgeons reach out. We had a lot we knew. We partnered with a lot of the top training facilities in the country to develop the product, to test it, to get it on athletes, to get good feedback, and just building the right relationships. And I think, going into the space, saying something nobody else was saying, which is that, hey, we have this vision to make products that not only provide functional benefit, but also look good. Nobody was saying that. And it's an exciting proposition. I think it's very hard to disagree with that thesis that the products that make you move better should also make you feel good when you wear them. Right. It's pretty hard to disagree with that. Yeah.
That's awesome. And, I think the organic nature, that's what you dream about, right? It's almost like people write books on how do you get organic growth. It's like, there's not really an answer to it, but that when you have growth like that, you realize that it's sustainable, that you're doing something real. It's so much different when you're paying somebody to say something versus somebody saying it because they believe in the product, so that's got to be phenomenal. And obviously, your work doesn't stop with Lasso, and, you have a foundation and you do startup consulting. I just wanted to give you a chance to talk a little bit about that as well, because I think obviously Lasso is a huge deal, but that stuff is also very important as well.
Yeah, so I've actually stopped charging any money to help people. So, I mean, if people need help, like, you can feel free to reach out and I'll help try and connect whatever dots I can, or maybe just provide as much insight as I can. But, the most tough part about the journey is that you need somebody there just to help you believe in yourself when you're going through it, right? Like, I'm sure when you guys left, I think both of you left lawyer jobs, right?
No, I was at a pharmaceutical company.
That's what it was. Okay. So yeah, I mean, leaving something like that, you just need a system of people that you look up to or trust, whatever that is, that say, hey, you're on the right track. You can do this thing. Whenever you have doubts, don't worry about it. Just keep going, keep testing. Because the reality is there's no advice anyone can give you about your own journey because they haven't lived your life and they don't have all the variables. But they can give you reinforcement that you should keep going and push you to continue to learn and allow yourself to make mistakes and not get down on yourself. I think those are the areas that, it's more like coaching, right? Like, a great coach will help an athlete get better because they allow that athlete to make mistakes and learn at a very rapid pace. And that's how I see it, to be honest.
I had one more question before we get to some of the fun stuff.
Okay.
Which is, in your answer, you were talking about how you had Champ Bailey come on early and celebrities and his investors. In the culture we're in today, a lot of startup companies, especially with social media, one of the things that they look for early on is, oh, if I can just get such and such who has 5 million followers to post about my brand, that it's going to instantly grow. And that is for me, I look at that and I say that's a very dangerous way of looking and thinking, because one, it undermines your whole marketing process. What is your actual marketing plan? But it is the way of culture. I just want to give you an opportunity to talk about that and what a good process is for a startup when it comes to celebrity partnerships or social influencers, a healthy way to look at it, to make sure you don't get caught in those traps. Because it's easy. If Kim Kardashian wants to promote your product, you don't want to say no to that, but you do want to make sure that you capitalize on that and you're in a position to capitalize on that. Just wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about that, just because it's such a big part of our culture now.
Yeah, totally. So not a lot of those partnerships will actually work just in a silo. But the important thing is to understand. So there's this notion of community-based marketing where, every person or every brand has their own community of people who share the same values. And so when you identify people who share the same values as you, who also have communities that may overlap, whether it's a demographic, psychographic, or just regional, and you're also pairing other advertising strategies around their community to convert them into members of your community, whether paid advertising, whether that's other partnerships in space, whether that's, sponsorships of events that are happening in the same space for that same community. You have to start thinking the manner of creating echoes for people, because it takes multiple impressions. I mean, this is science. It takes, I think it's average 7 impressions to get somebody to convert on e-commerce for most companies. I mean, if you're smart, you can reduce that. But ultimately, the whole idea of it is that people respond to storylines, and they respond to echoes of that storyline from trusted sources. And so if you're able to show a customer what your brand's about, what you're doing, why it's important to them, and where you're going, and then other people in their life that they trust, that they also follow, are able to echo that sentiment, you're able to really have some action with it. But we learned it the hard way. I mean, we have a lot of athletes that are involved in posts and do all of that. And those posts in a silo are fine, but those posts, when you're already advertising those communities, can then really generate impact. And so you just have to be very, very smart. And there's a lot of data involved in it in terms of impression counts and, all sorts of customer demos that you have to take into account to really get the maximum out of it. But every brand also operates differently. Like every car drives different. And you just kind of have to get a feel for what works for your community. And it might be different. Like some brands just don't do a lot of social media. Some brands will be heavy on Twitter, but not on Instagram, or vice versa. So you just have to understand where your people are, how they communicate, what makes them resonate, or what content resonates amongst that community. And then you have to do more of that.
One other question, sorry, V, and then we'll get to the fun stuff.
Yeah.
I guess this is a kind of fun question too. We've talked a little bit about the process, right? And the grind and what it takes. But there are also moments during this period of time. And you talked about that kind of earlier, just how everything is just kind of a series of moments, really. But like fun stuff. I mean, you mentioned going to the White House. You mentioned, Champ Bailey coming in, NFL adopting your product, a person coming over from, I think, Adidas and Reebok. You said, are there any some cool moments that you like, sometimes you got to take a step back and just be like, wow, I can't believe this happened, or I can't believe this is happening. And it's hard to do that sometimes when you're as ambitious as we are, right? It's cool. And then you like move to the next thing, but everyone's calling you like 2 weeks later and you're like, oh, I'm already past that. But are there any moments like that like just cool moments that maybe you mentioned already, or maybe that you haven't, that have been part of this process?
There's been a ton. You mentioned it. Forbes 30 under 30 was a really big one for me. That was a big goal, and I got it super young. I was 22 when I got on the list.
Wow.
That was awesome. White House obviously was a big one. I was a big admirer of President Obama when I was growing up, so it was a very nice moment.
Yeah, that's huge.
Person. Recently, more of those moments have to do with I'd say like the scene that we're in, for lack of a better word. So there's a lot of people who build brands that just do an excellent job with it. And being able to spend actual time with those people and have personal relationships and have them with a vested interest in my success, like almost from a mentor standpoint, um, not planning on doing any name dropping, but just I've been able to meet a lot of people I really look up to.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
meet them on a human level, which is interesting to me. That's what I'm
Yes.
excited about. And so those are the moments that I think I cherish the most, is when I'm able to work with people who are universally admired and they have a passion, interest, and also mutual admiration for me as a peer, as opposed to, just as like
Yeah.
some kid that they met that they're trying to like maybe help out or charge money for something. Like that's
Absolutely.
exciting. And that's what I hope to generate more of is, I want to be a very, very impactful person in the consumer brand space, and especially in the line of thinking of how do I build a brand that both improves the world and also makes money at the same time. That's where I would like to build my region of expertise.
So
Absolutely.
we spent quite a bit of time talking about two of your favorite things, and it just so happens that part of our show, at the end of it, we ask about those two things. So we've got two lists that we like to ask about. I'll hand it over to Mecca for the first one.
All right. First list is, tell us your top 5 musicians of all time
Also,
that
music.
influence you personally. Yeah.
And since hip hop is such a big thing,
Yeah. It could be rappers. It could be any type of music, but that influence you personally.
Okay, so then I'm going to open it up a little bit more than I initially had prepped. So music-wise, J. Cole for sure. He's number one on that list. Drake is number 2, and it's because I've listened to the song "Do Not Disturb" probably 10,000 times.
Right.
Amazing song. I would put Bon Iver on there. His music is fantastic, and it just it's a vibe. It keeps me going through the day. I would then add Linkin Park, because that was my whole youth. That angst, you gotta have some angst in you. And finally, it's tough because I have a lot of rappers that I really admire and listen to. But I think I would go outside of hip hop. I would probably go into the alt space. So I'd probably go with like a Coldplay.
Okay. Yeah.
It's just,
I love Coldplay.
Yeah, decades of excellence is very admirable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and you mentioned hip hop, can you, like the connectivity, right? The energy, we feel it all the time. Like if we're in a bad mood or something's not going right, I'll turn on Nipsey Hussle. Can you tell us about that influence on you as an entrepreneur personally, how it's actually helped you?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I have albums or playlists that I queue up based on the mood I'm feeling just to help me get through it. And I think the other part of it is just knowing too, like if I'm having kind of like a weird kind of like moody day, I just know that I'm going to turn on like a few of the older, like maybe Take Care I'll listen to front to back, or maybe some weekend stuff from back in the day, and just do like some blog writing that I have to do, or something that requires me to be more introspective. So I think, music, especially hip hop, can be a great facilitator for helping you dig deep. And if you listen to like a Nipsey is a great example. A lot of artists are so introspective, and it can really help you jog your own thoughts. Like I was really impressed with this new Big Sean album that just came out.
Yeah, I was too. I'm not a fan at all either.
Yeah, it was very good. And the topics he's talking about are just so forward. They're so current. I have not heard a rapper talking about, karma or like Western versus Eastern medicine, for example. I hadn't heard that before until I heard his project, and it was interesting. It helps you realize you can be yourself and be successful, because that's not traditionally like the cool stuff. So yeah, I admire that a lot about hip hop. It's a lot of individuality.
That's why Tupac was always my favorite, because I felt like he might have seemed like a different person on each song, but that was all him, and I think that was it kind of allowed me to explore all the different parts of myself as an artist. I didn't feel like I had to just talk about this one thing, that we're so diverse and complex individually. And he was able to really put that out there in so many different songs and it all be authentic. And that's why he's just always been my favorite. So yeah, that's
great.
Yeah. All right, last one.
the second list is going to probably be filled with a lot of NBA guys, but your top 5 athletes.
Yeah, this one's really a challenge. So I have to go ahead and just put on 2 of my guys on there, Champ Bailey and Earl Thomas, just for Lasso reasons. I'm gonna put on Babe Ruth because I was really into baseball growing up, and so I read a lot of books about him, and it was just like very inspiring to hear about him as a kid. I don't know what it was, but just something about baseball in Ohio in the fall growing up.
Yep.
It was a nice vibe. Um, the other 2 are easy. It's D Wade and LeBron. D Wade, I've always looked up to him because he molded fashion into basketball. I felt like he was the first major crossover athlete into pop culture from the NBA. Maybe not. I guess you've got, like, of course, Jordan, Vince Carter, all those guys, AI, right? But D Wade just kind of did it differently. He made the playoffs into a runway, and I just really admired the way he created that wave. And now everything someone wears to a game is like, it's a hot topic. Everybody wants to know what somebody wore walking into the arena that day. So I really like that. And I was impressed with him stepping back and having the humility to take a smaller role when he brought LeBron on. I think that's a really tough thing to do when you're a competitor, but it's almost like the ultimate competitive move is to sacrifice yourself to win. So I kind of really dig that. And then, of course, our Ohio boy, LBJ, seeing him grow over his career has been really inspiring, but seeing him also grow off the court has been incredible. And I think when he retires, it's going to be his legacy off the court is going to far surpass what he's ever done in basketball. And that's really saying something given the impact he's had on the court. But the thing that I feel like allows him to really make that impact off the court is something I've observed when I've watched his games recently. He has this sense for the game as opposed to just like shooting and passing. He has this sense for like the pace of the game, the rhythm, the tempo, the feel. And he seems to have gotten to an extreme level of mastery in terms of controlling the pace and the flow of a game. So you see that he doesn't necessarily drive to the rim as hard every single possession or shoot every possession in the first few quarters of a game, but it's more him feeling out the other team and just keeping it an even game. And when the fourth quarter comes, he's got this grasp of exactly what they're going to do, and he's able to just completely stymie them and win. I mean, it's eerie to watch him do it because it's a level of dominance. I think Jordan had the same type of game control, which is very unique. And so that, I think, as a business person, is very inspiring to me because you think about someone doing that in a sport, and it's like, well, you can actually do that in an industry. Like if you think about Virgil's impact, I know now he's gotten a lot of negative press, unfortunately, but what he did with fashion, you know, in the years that Off-White was trending before he came on Louis Vuitton, anything that Virgil was touching was it was cool, it was hot, or even like the brand Supreme, right? The way that they were able to come out of the gates. And to see somebody build the kind of impact and influence that they dictate culture, I think it really means that they have a great understanding for the market. They understand what makes people tick, and they know how to play that game to manipulate it. To me, it's the same as how LeBron controls the Lakers game right now. So that ultimately is what I would strive for, is to be able to have the kind of sense and understanding of the market we play in to really be able to start making some cultural impact. Because for us, you know, at our roots, we're a healthcare company. All our products go through the FDA. They're all registered, all that stuff. So when we look at the mass market, it's all about culture, because you can't make something cool that's not cool. So you have to understand how things flow.
Yeah. That was a great kind of summation, I guess you could say, and in conclusion. This has been a great interview, and make sure everybody who's listening, make sure you guys check out lassogear.com. Again, athletic and sports performance compression socks, and I'm sure more things coming. Partha, this has been phenomenal. We really root for your success. Again, you being a Columbus, Ohio boy makes us even all the more proud. And please come back and join us again and share your more success with us as it continues to grow.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
As DJ Khaled said, more life, more success.
Thanks, bro. Have a good one, man. Take care. Be safe out here.
Thank you, man.
Valley boys, we get on up.